Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Hit the bell icon button so that you don't miss out any tutorial.
Let's talk about the piano keyboard. Now, we use the piano keyboard in theory because it's probably the most just kind of ubiquitous instrument around. And the other reason we like it is that we can see all the notes. You know, if we were using something like a clarinet to talk about music theory, you can't see the notes on a clarinet. You know, you have to put in combinations of fingers to get each note. But on a piano keyboard, we can see, you know, this note and then this note and then this note. So it works out quite well for music theory. So in any music theory course, you're always focusing on the piano keyboard kind of as the template to see the notes. So here in MuseScore, you can actually pull up a piano keyboard if you go to, where is it, View Piano Keyboard, or you can just press P. And that pulls up this, right? And it's cool because I can play it, right? And it's neat. Okay, so here's our piano keyboard. So what we're going to do in this section is we're going to talk about how this thing works, right? And then the next section, we're going to talk about how this thing relates to this stuff, right? Where these come together. On the piano keyboard, we have two different kinds of keys. We have white keys. Those are these ones. They are the color white. And we have black keys. These ones. Oops. These ones. Right? So white keys and black keys. Now they all produce notes, right? But they work a little differently in terms of what we call them. They get different names and it can be a little confusing. So let's go through the white notes first and how they work and how the intervals work on a keyboard, and then we'll look at the black keys. So let's jump into the white keys on the keyboard. Okay, the white keys on the keyboard. Here's what we have. So we know now that note names go from A up through G, right? And then they start over again. So this is where they are. So we can see that the piano goes on and on and on and on for a long time. So I'll walk you through how to find this in a second, but here is an A. And then I'm just going to count up just to show you the A through G thing. And then I'll walk you through how to figure this out. But this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then A again. So these are both A. Right? And then B, C, D, E, F, G, A again. So this is an A. So the way, when you're looking at a keyboard, the way you can kind of ground yourself is to look at the pattern of black keys, because these exist in this pattern of 2, and then a pattern of 3, and then a pattern of 2, and a pattern of 3. Now we're going to talk about how to read the black keys in just a minute. But for now, let's use the black keys just as a way of knowing where we are on the white keys. For example, whenever you see the pattern of 2 black keys, you can go just to the left, and that's going to be a C. Now remember, C is a very good grounding spot for all things when it comes to music theory. We like to know where C is, and we like to start on C. And why not A? It'll make more sense later when we start talking about keys. But C is kind of it's the easiest one to understand when it comes to keys. So we talk about C a lot, and that's why C is labeled here. And there's another reason that C is labeled here, which I'll talk about in just a second. So 2 black keys just to the left, that's a C. I can go all the way up here. 2 black keys just to the left, that's a C. That's a much higher C, but it's still a C. So 2 black keys left, that's a C. 2 black keys left, that's a C. 2 black keys left, that's a C. So here's all my Cs. And this is actually one too, but you can't see the black keys because it ends. But so that's a good grounding spot. If we want to find A, the way I was just using A, look for the row of 3 black keys, and it's in between the top 2. That's A. So that's A, that's A, that's A, that's A, that's A, and that's A. Now, we're not going to focus a bunch of time on how to play the piano, but we do need to know how to read the piano and know what notes are where, right? So if you can find C, you can pretty much do everything you need, because then if you need to find an E, you can go C, D, E, right? There's an E. If we need to find, I don't know, pick any letter. If we need to find a B, we can go C, D, E, F, G, A, B. There's a B. We can also think the other way, and we can say, if this is a C and you can do the alphabet backwards, you know that right before C is B. So we can find a B going down the other way. So this is a B. So in other words, B is the group of 3 right on top. Just to the right of the group of 3 black notes is always going to be a B. So you can kind of do these tricks, whatever works for your brain, to kind of remember where they are. What most people do is they find C and they memorize that spot of just to the left of these 2 black keys is C, always. And then you get used to counting until you just start to memorize where the notes are. After a while, you'll start to say like, oh, okay, F is here, B is here, A and G, and you can kind of know your way around after you do this for a while, but it takes practice, just like anything. So for now, get comfortable with C and know that we count up the alphabet to to G, and then it starts over at A, B, and then C again. Okay? So get comfortable finding where that C is, and you will be much happier. Now, I want to point out one more quick thing here. Why this one is labeled, it gets a little special attention. This is what we call middle C. And we'll talk more about this later, but just so that you know why it's here. Sometimes it's hard to know exactly what octave we're in, right? We could be really high, really low, or whatever. So we use this notation of middle C to basically mean the middle of the keyboard, right? We kind of just use it as a grounding spot. And there's a spot in the staff where that note is. It's right down here. It's right at the bottom of the staff. And I'll show you that shortly. But this one is labeled C just to show us that it's middle C, right? Cool. So let's move on and let's talk about the black keys. Okay, so let's talk about the black keys. These can be a little odd the way these are set up. Now remember, I didn't set these up. This is just the way this has been done for centuries and centuries. So this is what we call the black keys, and this is the system we use to identify the black keys. It's kind of strange. I'm just going to warn you. But after some practice, you get used to it pretty fast. Okay, so let's focus in right here. We know this is C, right? And we know this is D, okay? So D comes right after C, right? If you count up the alphabet, A, B, C, D, right? There's nothing in between. There's no letter in between. So we have a note in between, right? So what do we call this thing? There's got to be something that we call that. So here's the answer. We call this a C sharp. And we use this symbol, the number sign or the hashtag symbol is the kind of modern thing we would call it. But in music terms, we call that sharp. We call that symbol sharp. So sharp gets attached to a note when it's a little bit higher. So think of sharp as meaning a little bit higher. So in this case, this note, we would call it C sharp, because what we're calling it is C a little bit higher than C. So C sharp. Sharp means just a hair higher than C. All right? Now here's where things get confusing. Well, actually, hold off on that for a second. Let's lock in this sharp idea. So what would we call this note? Okay? It is D a little bit higher. So we would call it D sharp. Okay? What about this one? Or sorry, what about this one? This is, well, what is this note? This is C, D, E, F. So this is an F. So this note is going to be F sharp. This note is going to be G sharp because that's G and it's a little bit higher. This is A, so this is A sharp. So A a little bit higher. What happens right here? What if we went B? This is a B. So what if we went B a little bit higher? There's no such thing. There's no such thing as a B sharp because B a little bit higher is C. So we don't use B sharps. Now I'm going to put one little thing in here that when you get into really advanced music theory, you do encounter a B sharp. So just file that away, but you probably will never see it. Maybe if you get into really advanced music theory. But for the purposes of us, a B sharp does not exist. Same thing right here. What note is this? Let's go down an octave. Here's an E. These are both E's. E, a little bit higher, turns into F. There's nothing in between. So there's no such thing as E sharp. So E sharp and B sharp do not exist. Okay? So we know how sharps work, right? Now, here's the somewhat confusing part. We have another symbol. We have this symbol that means flat. Okay? Flat means a little bit lower. So sharp means a little bit higher, and flat means a little bit lower, right? Easy enough. However, what that means is if we go back to this note, we know that we can call this a C sharp because it's C a little bit higher. But we can also call it a D flat. So all black notes could have two names. All black notes do have two names. I'm sorry. All black notes have two names. We can call this note C sharp or we can call it D flat. And when it comes to the piano, you're going to put your finger on the exact same spot. If the note says to play a C sharp or it says to play a D flat, it's that. It's the same thing. So all black notes have two possible names. Let's look at a couple other flats. What about this one? We can call this one E flat or D sharp. That's D a little bit higher, sharp, or E a little bit lower, flat. What about this one? We can call this one F sharp, because it's F a little bit higher, or we can call it G flat, G a little bit lower, right? So that's how the sharps and flats work. Let's go to C. Can we have a C flat? No, we can't. For the same reason we don't have a B sharp. There's nothing in between. There's nothing here. There's not a black key here. So there's no C flat and there's no B sharp. And again, here, there's no F flat or E sharp. This is F. So F flat would be a black note here, and there isn't one. So that's how sharps and flats work. Now, collectively, we call those symbols accidentals. They're called accidentals. So a flat and a sharp is called an accidental. So when there is an accidental on a note, that means that there is either a flat or a sharp on it. That's just the term we use for both of those two symbols. Okay, so that's how we read the black keys. Now, why is there two names? Why would they do that to us? There's a good reason for it, and it has to do with keys. So if you're in a certain key, you might want to use flats. And if you're in another key, you might want to use sharps. It depends on how the key is set up. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later. In fact, that's going to be the majority of what we talk about when we talk about music theory, is how notes relate to keys and when you would want to use flats and sharps. So for now, just remember that these can have two names. And you'll see how this works a little bit better when we start connecting the piano keyboard to the notation on the screen.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, do give us a thumbs up and share it. Also check out amazing discounts and offers on our premium courses in the description below.